Hello, everybody. Welcome to part two of this interview. If you're joining us from part one, really great. But if you're not, this episode is going to be about food consumption, and Professor Mary Boyle talked about that in her second part of the interview with Iram. So we're just going to play the interview from here, get right on in, and we'll see y'all after.
Make sure that you eat the right foods. Make sure that you're mindful, you get movement, your body is made for moving. That is what's going to help you long term.
I also want to tie this into the example that you gave me a while ago, that when you traveled to New York, I believe last winter, you ate all the foods that you wanted, but because you walked the entire day, your glucose never spiked. And you saw that from your continuous glucose monitor, right?
Right. So I love experimenting and getting data on myself. And so I've used a bunch of apps, and with these apps, I get a continuous glucose monitor. And this continuous glucose monitor is I wear it, and then I look and I see how my body is metabolizing food. So, for example, I'm sure you know. So we have the three macros. We have fat, protein, and carbohydrates. The proteins and the fats do not increase your glucose level in your blood at all. But with the carbohydrates, things that you eat that are carbs are converted to glucose. And now, if you ate sucrose, you would have glucose and you would have fructose, right? It's a disaccharide. But anyway, my trip to New York, I went to this really amazing French restaurant. And I had croissant, I had baguette, I had all sorts of carbs. Now, carbs have a way of converting very quickly into glucose. And so I would normally, if I had like one piece of bread, I would see that on my CGM. I would see the spike. And so what ended up happening is we ate and then we walked across the city multiple times. I think, we ended up walking like 10 miles, back and forth or more, because my son loves walking. And never once did any of that glucose spike. Even though the food that I ate would have naturally spiked that. So that's a very clear indication that walking after a meal is what you really want to do, because that levels out your glucose and it also prevents it from being stored.
That's really, really amazing. It's a shared experience from you that I have never forgotten, and I don't think I will ever forget it.
Yeah. So always walk after you eat. It gives you kind of license not to go crazy, but you don't want to just eat and then do this Thanksgiving thing and just not consume, just sit down and do nothing.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask, as an easy example, something like consuming cane sugar can cause the glucose spikes. What are some other things that we consume that we might not necessarily think would cause glucose spike? Like, for example, sugar-free drinks like diet soda. Are they healthy? No. Are they a better alternative, though?
Oh my goodness. I think this is probably one of my most favorite things to talk about. So, I can't even remember. It was in the early 2000s, back when, I was teaching 107A in the summer, and I was going through the recent research that they had just sequenced the sweet taste receptor. And then they looked and they said, oh, where else in the body do we have the sweet taste receptor? And they found that this sweet taste receptor is, by the way, in your bones and in your gut, among other places. And in your gut, it's in the L cells. By the way, you guys all know the L cells because that's where GLP-1 is released. but L cells also trigger insulin release. And so you have the sweet taste receptor on your L cells in your gut. Okay, so what happens when you ingest a diet drink or any artificial sweetener? Well, first of all, the artificial sweetener is an agonist. It binds to the same receptor that glucose binds to. And what is that? That you have that in your tongue. That's why you perceive sweet. So your tongue projects up to your brain, and your brain goes, oh, sweet. But more than that, it says to your pancreas, you have a direct line from your brain to your pancreas through your autonomic nervous system that says, prepare, sugar is coming your way. And then your pancreas says, oh, really? I need to release some insulin. So what happened? So you didn't really have sugar, but you have some insulin. So now you're going to go hypoglycemic.
And what is hypoglycemia?
It means that you have low blood sugar because the insulin just took away all of the glucose that you have in your blood, but you just had artificial sweetener. You didn't have any real glucose. But then if you always are drinking diet soda, then your body gets used to not believing the sugar signal. So then when you actually have sugar, then you go hyperglycemic because your body has dysregulated the insulin response. And so the brain, it's called the cephalic phase, where your brain senses that there's going to be sugar in your blood and that it tells your pancreas to release it. And so I realized I was a Diet Coke junkie, truly a Diet Coke junkie. And once I realized that, I never took another Diet Coke again because I knew at that point it was related to neurodegeneration. Now you're going to say, well, how'd you know? There's this researcher in the very early days. Her name is Susan De La Monte. And she is a pathologist. And she looked at brains of people who died with Alzheimer's disease and people who died with type 2 diabetes. And if you looked at those brains, the degeneration that both of them have, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two of them. So if you have insulin dysregulation, insulin resistance, and high glucose levels, like you live with high glucose levels, you're killing neurons and you're damaging your brain in much the same way. And so a lot of the early research suggested that Alzheimer's might be diabetes type 3.
Wow.
And so your brain uses glucose in a different way than your body. Your brain, of course, uses it quite a bit for your neurons and so on, but it doesn't use insulin to bring in the glucose. It uses insulin as a signaling hormone. And so there's a very, very strong relationship between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's disease, and also some of the other dementias. And so it's really very connected. And what we're finding in our research that fatty liver, it's called NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is very much related to neurodegeneration and so on. It's really very serious.
Wow. I need a moment to process that. Was wow. So no diet sodas.
No, I don't think that diet sodas would be the really great. And so I would also caution against saying, well, if I'm not going to drink diet soda, maybe I should just drink the sugary beverage. To which I would say, no, that would not be really very good. And one of the reasons why it's not good is, every sucrose has one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. And they are processed very differently in your body. So every single cell in your body knows how to deal with glucose. The only system in your body that deals with fructose is your liver.
Mm.
And so drinking fructose, so if you drink a sugary beverage, you're going to have a lot of fructose. So we always talk about high fructose corn syrup, right? So high fructose corn syrup is really like 60% fructose. But regular table sugar is 50% fructose. So it's not that different. It's really close to the same. We appropriately vilified high fructose corn syrup, but every scoop of table sugar is 50% fructose. And your body can't absorb it properly when it's like in liquid form. And so it goes straight up through the portal vein, up to the liver, and then your liver processes it. And it actually is like an anti-nutrient. And so it can cause liver damage. And what they're finding is high levels of fructose will drive NAFLD, which is the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So they're finding in 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds, they need liver transplants because when your liver fails, that's it. You can't survive. And a lot of it is that sort of fructose. That's not the only reason, but that's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very insightful.
I know, it's really depressing. It's super depressing. Let's go on to something really fun.
Okay.
Why do you need to eat your veggies?
Nutrients.
We could. What about your microbiome?
For prebiotic
And
probiotic purposes.
yes, that's exactly right. So when you eat we call them MACs, right?
Mm-hmm.
The microbiota accessible carbohydrates, like broccoli, asparagus, cauliflower, what else? Any one of those, right? The good ones. Asparagus. Did I say asparagus? I don't know. But anyway, all of those are really great because what they have is they are kind of indigestible, but that means that your microbiome in your colon, in your big intestine, can use those. And so what makes that so special is that these are called short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids are what keeps you from getting colon cancer. And I know you think, oh, that's an old person's thing. But colon cancer is predicted to be the #1 killer of people 30 years old in the next 10 years. And that's because they don't eat enough vegetables or these foods that produce short chain fatty acids. So mortality really has changed. So in the early days, the things that would get people in terms of mortality would be infectious disease. So if you had, a bacteria or something like that that could kill you, well, we're really pretty good, for the most part, at taking care of infectious diseases. However, the majority of the mortality right now is on chronic diseases and inflammatory diseases. So you could think that Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, they all have an element of inflammation, as does liver disease and cardiovascular disease. Those are all chronic. They take a long time to develop, but they will get you. And the reason why it's really concerning to see, you know, you used to never see non alcoholic fatty liver disease in anybody under 60. You used to never see that. That was like unheard of. And now there are people 20 years old or children who have NAFLD. And that is really, really bad because that is not only high inflammation, but that's also liver disease. That's major liver disease. And so it's the chronic diseases that is associated with a lot of the inflammation, and a lot of chronic disease comes from um, inappropriate nutrition and maybe in so many ways. Some people talk about our obesogenic environment. So our environment is programming us to do the wrong thing, like, you know, stay up late, blue light, disrupted sleep, foods that are addictive, and then, you know, change how you eat because your microbiome is telling you you need to eat a certain food.
I do want to ask about melatonin production and why is it important, how is it important, and how is it affected when, for example, you eat a meal and you feel the post-meal tiredness and you want to take a nap. Does melatonin work in that situation if you were to take a nap after a meal?
Oh, no, 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 no. Melatonin is pretty much regulated with the light, and melatonin is the next synthetic step after serotonin, actually. But when you eat, you have orexin. And so that's what you feel after you had your really big turkey dinner at Thanksgiving and you want to just go to sleep. So food does have a calming effect on you. It's like back when in the evolutionary days when you were in the cave and you just ate, you're like, oh, I don't have to get up and go find more food. I just ate. And so, and also the lack of orexin means that you want to get up and walk around and find food. And so, yeah. And the melatonin production is from your pineal. And so your suprachiasmatic nucleus, it only wants to produce it pretty early in the night, like, you know, maybe 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. If you're a teenager, I think it's a little bit later. And then that is really important for deep sleep. And I think one of the important things for deep sleep is to recognize that that's when your brain clears its metabolites out. So your cells shrink and your fluid in your brain washes all the metabolites out. And so people who don't sleep, like people who have sleep apnea or have sleep disturbances, are also at significantly higher risk for neurodegenerative diseases. So if you are someone who has a sleep disturbance, it's going to be really important for you to find someone who can help you with that.
Speaking of sleep apnea, do you know if sleep apnea is curable or recoverable?
I don't know. I haven't studied that per se. I think some of sleep apnea is associated with obesity, or it can be associated with that. Maybe there could be some other things. Maybe some people have allergies, and then that causes to have an obstruction. But I know that people who have that have very disrupted sleep, and they're at really high risk for a neurodegenerative disease.
How many hours before sleep is good to stop the food intake?
One of my other favorite topics is intermittent fasting. So here on campus or in the UCSD community, you have a researcher named Sachin Panda, and Dr. Panda is at the Salk Institute, and he has an app called My Circadian Clock, and he's done studies on people at restricting the time that they eat, the food that they eat. And he has shown that that is one way that you can become metabolically healthy. So if you restrict your eating to, let's say, a 16-8 protocol, so what does that mean? That means that you can eat during 8 hours of the day, but you don't eat during 16 hours. So the 16 hours that you don't eat is essentially you can have water, you can have tea, no sugar, or coffee, or something like that, right?
Like nothing that causes a glucose spike.
Right, right. You can have broth and those sorts of things, but you don't want to have any other food, right? You can have water or you can have coffee, no sugar or tea, but anyway, the advantage of that is to give your body a break, because that's when your liver can use get rid of some of the excess fat. That's when your liver gives you back some of the glycogen that it's stored, and they're showing that it's really helps in repairing your system. So a 16-8 um, intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding cycle would look something like this. If you took the bulk of that fasted time when you were sleeping, so then let's say you might want to eat at like start at eating at, let's say, noon, and then maybe you finish eating at 8 p.m. That would be an 8 hour window. You could start eating. A lot of people go from 11 to 7, and they find that that is a really productive way of eating. So you don't necessarily limit the foods that you eat, it's just the time that you eat. And his research shows that it's about the time of day. So you don't want to eat close to your bedtime,
Mm-hmm.
because your body is metabolically set up to not necessarily process food, but rather your body is set up to uh, basically help repair your system.
Mm-hmm. Somebody told me once to maybe only eat when the sun is out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that statement?
I think that's a great statement. So when the sun goes down, it's probably a good time not to eat. So a lot of students will say, "Oh no, I just got home from school. I'm really hungry." So then I would say, "Okay, if you really need to eat, why don't you have something that has protein and don't have anything that has carbs?" But food actually interferes with your sleep. But if you're not going to be able to sleep because you're so hungry, then you want to have something that maybe doesn't have so many carbs.
Mm-hmm. A light snack.
Yeah, you don't want to have uh, popcorn and ice cream sundae at 6, no, excuse me, like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. You don't want those midnight snacks. Those are not going to help you, because your body is not going to use that. Where's your 1 hour walk?
Yeah. I surprisingly hear a lot of people saying that they eat a bowl of cereal at nighttime, kind of close to before they go to sleep. What do you think about
I
that?
hear that too. I think that that's a habit that's worthy of getting rid of. you know, I would say that um, maybe when the box of cereal runs out, don't replenish it and give yourself an opportunity not to do that.
Right. Going back to intermittent fasting, I remember you saying to open up your fasting with protein, not other nutrients, right?
Generally, protein's a good way to do that, but you want to be gentle with your system. And so you always want to make sure things are where, what makes it easy for you. So I'm willing to be individual. You just don't want to overload it with like a donut or something like that. That might not be the best choice.
Mm-hmm. So, what kind of foods are good ideas to open the appetite with?
Oh, well, the things that are, oh my goodness, there's a lot out there in terms of um, what to think about. So you want to have fruits. So even though fruits have fructose, they have fiber with them. And so that's way better choice than making smoothies. Smoothies take away all your fiber, they open it up, and then now you have a lot of fructose that your liver has to deal with. So I know that there are a lot of people that are convinced that smoothies are great, but I think that the evidence is pretty clear that there's a lot, you get a fructose hit with that. So, I'm not going to demonize them immediately, but be careful with that. It's better to eat the banana than put the banana in the smoothie.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to eat 3 strawberries or 5 strawberries or 10 strawberries than to have them all in a smoothie. So better to eat your fruit than spin it in a blender.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to get 30 different fruits and vegetables in a week so that you can maximize the variety. Um, there are a lot of people who have different opinions about meats and so on and beefs. I think that everybody's all over the map, so I think that you just do what is most comfortable for you. But I would certainly try to make sure that I would limit the amount of foods that are deep fried and those sorts of things because you really don't want those. You don't want to have the fats that have been fried. And if you eat meats, you don't want to have them that are so charred, so that because that can also have uh, problems for cancer and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say that dairy is not great. I think a lot of it depends on what your habits are and so on. So, yogurt, I think a lot of people talk about yogurt as being really quite helpful. You want to make sure that you don't get yogurt that is so filled with um, sugars that you are nutritionally hurting yourself. So, I would probably say the most important number one thing is to minimize any added sugar in your world.
Mm-hmm.
Try to keep it under maybe 10 grams per day. And you'd be surprised how hard that is in today's world. I think it's super hard living on campus when you have a lot of food that's being prepared outside of your control. So
Right.
try to have foods that are as natural as possible
Mm-hmm.
and minimally processed. I know that that's a big deal, but you want to do that.
That's funny that you mentioned yogurt and added sugars because just last week I was at Whole Foods, actually, the healthier grocery store, and I wanted to buy fruit mixed yogurt. And so I looked at one of them and it said 1 cup had about 10, 11 grams of sugar, but it's cane sugar. And I was looking for a less added sugar alternative for it. I couldn't find it until I saw one from the same brand that said less sugar. And I looked, it said maybe 3 grams of sugar, but I checked the ingredients immediately. I'm like, what are they substituting the cane sugar with to make it sweeter? And it said stevia. But I was in a dilemma. I wasn't sure which option to pick. What's your opinion about stevia?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that the research is not in on stevia and the quote natural artificial sweeteners or natural alternative sweetener alternatives. I think that that's where they call them. And so I'm not a fan of that because if you perceive it as sweet, your brain is still processing it as sweet. Um, so anyway, so I think that some people, if they're trying to get off of sugars, maybe using natural sweetener additives might be helpful. But I think your long term goal is to change your palate a little bit from being super sweet because that's something that we've learned. So, probably what I would recommend, it's the boring alternative, is to get the unsweetened yogurt and then put your own fruit in it.
That definitely does seem like the better choice.
I mean, you can even chop it up.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. I don't know. It just feels like you want to do it the right way.
Hmm.
Um, give yourself the opportunity to succeed and not have. I mean, yogurt is so amazing for you, but then when you look at how much is getting processed, there's a lot of additional things other than the the enzymes and the probiotics.
Hmm. We can't just lure into marketing tactics. We
No.
need to always look at the ingredients and really see what we're eating. Really make conscious decisions
Yeah.
with it.
And I think I've found that anytime somebody says it's healthy, run away. Because there's so many different ways to call sugar a sugar. And they're like, no, it's not. The only thing that, I mean, do you ever see broccoli have a label that says healthy? No. So, do the things that you know are healthy, right? Or more healthy. If it came out of the ground or got eaten coming out of the ground, then you're okay.
Except be careful about potatoes
I
because because of
know.
the carb content.
Yeah, they have carbs, but they also have high potassium and so on. So I mean, I would be happy if somebody ate a potato or made their own like mashed potatoes or whatever instead of eating chips or anything like that.
Hmm.
Because at least it came out of the ground.
Right. That makes me think of, well, French fries and
Mhm.
the types of oil they're being fried with.
Yeah.
What type of oil is healthy for the gut? What type of oil is not
Oh
healthy
my
for the gut?
goodness. Yeah. Well, I think heating oils and depending on the different oils that you have, like the corn oils and so on, you probably want to stay away from that. That's not like the best idea. Um, Also, if you heat olive oil to a certain temperature, it'll produce trans fats, so you've got to be careful with that.
What are trans fats?
Trans fats are when you have a bond that goes in the opposite direction. They're illegal to American food or US and Europe right now. It's illegal to have any foods with trans fats. But you can make trans fats by heating olive oil. So don't heat up olive oil beyond a certain temperature, right? So you want to make that in your salads and low temperature. Um,
I've heard a better alternative for heating up oil is avocado oil.
oh, really? I don't know about that.
Mm.
That's pretty cool.
Because it doesn't have the unhealthy effects like
Oh,
heating
really?
up olive oil.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Avocados are my favorite because they're really high in fiber. So you want to get 30 grams of or 35 grams of fiber every day. Oh my gosh, you know how hard that is to get? So you better love avocados because they have not only the healthy fats, but they also have fiber.
What is fiber?
Oh my goodness, that's part of the short chain fatty acid pathway. So you want to have food that is not digested by you, but it feeds your bacteria so your bacteria are happy. So the most important thing is, you want your microbiome, which are the bacteria inside of your gut, you want the good bacteria, the ones that are really healthy for you and help you survive, because you won't survive without it. You want to feed them. And so that's what the fiber does. The fiber feeds them. And if you don't eat enough fiber, you're not going to have enough of them.
I've been told that fiber is what gives you the full feeling of fullness.
Yes.
That ties into the hormone leptin. Can you talk
yes.
a little bit about leptin?
Leptin. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we have insulin. And so insulin is a short term energy sensor. So it says, oh, I've just eaten, so now I'm going to release my insulin, right? So my insulin is all about storing energy, right? Well, leptin is released by your fat cells, and it's a hormone. And that basically tells your body if you have enough storage of food to make it to live. And so if you don't have enough food, then your body is going to feel like it's starved. So if your leptin levels are not high enough, then your body's going to say, "Oh, you need to go get some food." So what happens with people when they go on a crash diet is they lose body fat, true, but then their brain goes, "Oh my God, I'm going to starve." And then that's what causes them to go eat more, and they gain back the weight.
And that's one of the reasons that diets don't work.
Right, that you get a lot of the yo-yo. So leptin is essentially the hormone of satiety. So it tells you that you have eaten enough and you are well enough fed to survive, to be fertile, to have a child. If your leptin levels are low, then you're not going to be fertile because your body, it's metabolically really expensive to have a child.
Leptin is the hormone that ultimately makes your body weight stays consistent. So, in terms of weight loss, what do we need to do to actually have weight loss?
Yeah, well, it's actually a little bit complicated because just like you can have insulin resistance, you can have leptin resistance. So that means essentially that your body is blind, that you have enough body fat on you, and so you never feel like you're ever full. And so if you're leptin resistant, then no matter what, you're always hungry. And leptin can get dysregulated by continuous yo-yo diets, crash diets, or eating some of the wrong foods all the time. And then also your sleep cycle and so on can be involved with that.
What do you think about the diet of eating like a bird, always eating a little bit?
Yeah, I think that might not necessarily be the best thing. I think that we do better if you limit how much insulin spikes you get all the time. So you want to make sure that you don't have raised insulin all the time because raised insulin will put on fat. It's the growth hormone, but you don't need to be growing all the time.
Right. I do want to bring up one thing that I didn't get a chance to ask in terms of smoothies. Usually in smoothies, it's made with a mix of bananas and blueberries. But recently, I've learned that eating them at the same time is not a very good idea. Can you tell me why?
No, I can't. I remember seeing that article, but I think that banana does something, but I don't know what it is. In fact, I saw the article, but I don't know it. You tell me.
I remember it's something being like the molecules in the banana block maybe the receptors of what the blueberry, the antioxidantal
Oh, maybe, yeah.
benefits that the blueberry will have.
Right.
Banana blocks it, so you
Yeah.
don't get the benefits of the blueberries.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think there was a headline in some newspaper, "Don't eat your bananas in your smoothies" or whatnot. Yeah. But the antioxidants, you're just going to get those amazing antioxidants all day long with your veggies and your fresh fruits. I think that if you turn your view to what is amazing and good as to something that makes and nourishes your body, the choices will become easy and then you'll end up enjoying them the most.
I'm going to be switching gears a little bit. Our first topics of this episode, we briefly mentioned the ketogenic diet. Can you tell me a little bit about it and its benefits of it?
Oh, very good. Yeah, the ketogenic diet is actually pretty incredible. I know that it's in the media and it's all over the place and so on. So let me just take a step back and tell you the people or for whom a ketogenic diet is a good idea.
Well, let's take another step back and explain what ketogenic diet is.
Yeah, okay. So, a ketogenic diet, for the most part, remember we have three food macros. We have the carbohydrates, we have the fats, and we have the proteins. A ketogenic diet, its goal is to minimize the number of carbohydrates that you have. And for the most part, for a strict for a strict ketogenic diet, I don't know, maybe under 20 grams, maybe under 50, depending on what literature you read. If you're doing it with, let's say, a neurologist or an epileptologist because you have uncontrolled seizures, then you're going to be working very much directly with a physician, and they're going to be monitoring your ketones in your blood and making sure that you are in ketosis. So, what does that mean? That means that ketone bodies are produced in your liver and they are an alternative fuel source. So, ketones can drive your mitochondria so that you get ATP. That's how your fuel source is. And your brain can actually use ketones, and ketones, they would automatically appear in your body, your blood, is when you don't have, excuse me, a high enough level of glucose or carbs that you're eating. And so they would call that starvation. But it's really not starvation because you're eating, you're just not eating carbs. But if you were starving, you would have these ketones. And so your body would generate those. So, anyway, so make a long story short, people who have insulin resistance are type 2 diabetic and cannot process glucose properly because they're insulin resistant or they don't have any insulin production in their beta cells, then they would benefit from being on a diet that limits the amount of carbohydrates so they don't have to worry about insulin or sugar levels. And so, one of the ways that Dr. Fung, um, he is a nephrologist in Canada, and he has a number of books out there. Jason Fung, he has a book called The Diabetic Code. He has a number of books out there, and he, as a nephrologist, he saw a lot of people who were having kidney failure as a result of their diabetes, their type 2 diabetes. And people used to be told that once they have type 2 diabetes, they cannot, they will always have it. But he showed that through intermittent fasting and limiting carbs, essentially being on a ketogenic diet, that you're able to reverse obesity and type 2 diabetes by being on that diet.
That's really, really great
It's
news.
amazing. It's amazing. People were at the brink of having their limbs amputated, their foot amputated, and because of Dr. Jason Fung, really were rescued from that. Now, there's a lot of Hollywood controversy. There's a lot of, anything that seems like it's a fad, but the ketogenic diet has been around a long time. I think in 1920s, physicians at Johns Hopkins actually used it to help with epileptic seizures. And we know that ketone bodies actually lower the threshold, the firing threshold of neurons. And so it's very, very protective for the brain. So they find that people who have Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, their memory improves as a result of being on ketogenic diet.
Wow. So, does ketogenic diet also cures Alzheimer's?
No,
Is
no,
Alzheimer's not curable, right?
not curable. But if you can delay Alzheimer's, that's a win
Mm-hmm.
because that means you have more quality years of life. Also means that you're less at risk of, maybe continuing that. And also, if you can improve your memory. I mean, right now our drugs aren't doing a very good job, but they find that when you have Alzheimer's patients and Parkinson's patients on ketogenic diets, that they're improved. And why are they improved? Is because their glucose problems in their brain is not processing glucose properly. So if they are on a ketogenic diet, they also improve with exogenous ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So that really does make a difference. It's actually quite amazing. Now I know the ketogenic diet is very popular among weightlifters if they want to cut and then they lose the fat on their body. But basically, the ketogenic diet says, "Oh, let me take the fat in your body and use that as a fuel source."
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very productive for people who have a high BMI. That's a
Mm-hmm.
very good start.
So the ketogenic diet, you mostly eat fatty foods. You eat also mostly proteins, and you very very minimally eat carbs. You
That's right.
still eat a little bit, but it's very little.
Very little. Like the carbs that you eat are in broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
That broccoli has some carbs, but you don't want to have like pieces of bread or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what if you have a lot of protein? Does protein turn into sugar,
Yeah, it
carbs?
does. It does. And so that's one of the things that you probably don't want to be on a ketogenic diet for very long because there's a little bit of controversy in terms of the amount of fats that people eat. Because to be on a true ketogenic diet like they would for epilepsy, you have majority, like 80% of your diet is fat. And that's actually really hard to be on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the popular twist for the ketogenic diet is just to go low carb.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that way you can have a balance between protein and fats. And so, like, nuts are really good, almonds are good, have walnuts and coconut. Coconut has beta hydroxybutyrate, which is a ketone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I do remember, correct me if I'm wrong, that ketogenic diet, a benefit of ketogenic diet is that it's also anti-carcinogen, right?
Yeah, it tends to go along with that because it's anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of cancers emerge as a result of inflammation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm a big fan of the ketogenic diet. I've been a fan of that diet for a long time. One of the very first studies that I read, I couldn't believe it. Um, basically, it's very protective of your brain. And so, as a neuroscientist, anything that's very protective of your brain is a win for me. But I know it's a tough diet to be on, but I think that there are a lot of benefits for, especially short term, and to kind of, it improves your attention. It does a lot of things, but you kind of, I don't know. You don't want to make it a fad, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. This is all very great information. Thank you so, so much for sharing. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or key takeaways for our listeners?
Oh my goodness. Um, I really want to think about like what would grandma tell me, right? Your day-to-day life. If grandma says, be happy, hang out with your friends, do things that are kind to other people, be kind to others, and, eat foods that are not so processed, or, make your own soups and so on. I think that that goes a long way. I know it's really tough in a college environment, but try to make the best of it with all the food choices that you have and help yourself with a little bit of extra walking.
Great. Thank you so much. And if you are a UCSD student, please do not graduate without taking COGS 163 with Professor Mary Boyle. It's truly a life-changing class. Thank you so much, Professor Mary Boyle, for being my guest speaker and sharing all this very valuable information for so many people for years to come. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much. Yay!
Oh, we did it.
Thank you so much for listening to the last portion of the interview. Did you guys have any wow or I can't believe I never thought of this moments while listening to the interview?
Starting with me, as someone who really, I don't do anything bad except drink soda. That's like the one thing that is my downfall. And I felt really terrible after listening to the interview for both diet soda and regular soda because both of them have really awful consequences to my insulin levels. And as someone who already is pre-diabetic, like disproposed because of my genetics, that made me even more worried. So yeah, I had like a little life crisis after listening to the second part of the interview.
I agree with that as well. While I don't consume a lot of soda, I think it's just listening to her talk about like diabetes and Alzheimer's and just like neurodegeneration, like generative diseases, like how it's all connected was really, really shocking because like I never realized like how similar they can be and how like the effects are that detrimental to us. And I'm just wondering like we eat so much processed food, especially here in the US, and like also knowing that healthy foods are not available to everyone is just makes me question like what we're putting in our body and how like what we're not going to know until like 50 years from now too, like how impactful this all is. So
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. One of them was on the section where you two were talking about trans fats. So I think the topic came up of olive oil and avocado oil. It's really interesting because I like to cook. So I know you mentioned avocado oil is better for frying at high temperatures. I don't know if this relates to the trans fats and why they're formed when you heat olive oil at a high temperature. Fun fact, olive oil has a lower smoke point. So what that means is, like it starts smoking at a lower temperature as opposed to avocado oil, it starts smoking at a higher temperature. And when oil reaches its smoke point, especially flavored oils like olive oil, they tend to develop like a bitter taste. So like uncharacteristic for olive oil, which is known to be like fruity and like tart kind of. Uh, so I thought that was really interesting that like I I don't know if it's actually the reason why, but that it kind of relates. And then also like Jasmine mentioned, the fact that not everyone has access to healthy foods is scary to think about given these effects, like these societal barriers to healthy food, like food deserts and that kind of thing, like directly impact our health and our longevity. I think it's really valuable to think about.
On a college campus, you mentioned it was pretty difficult, and I agree because like there's not that much variety in like the markets for like what's available on campus. But yeah, that's what caught my attention a lot. Or like yeah.
And also, like, as someone who took a food anthropology class, like, we studied, like, inequities in food and food colonization as well, because Native Americans are the most predisposed minority group to have type 2 diabetes, so much that they consider diabetes a normal part of aging, which is so horrible because all they have is processed food. So, like, as Mary said, it's so hard to get access to all these fruits and vegetables, and also learning about what choices you can make for yourself when you have no one to advise you or you have like a food desert around you, like one grocery store for a 30-mile radius.
Yeah, I've heard stories about like people who live on reservations having to pay like a premium for like fresh goods. I'm not sure of like exact prices or statistics, but I've definitely heard stories about people having to pay like ridiculous amounts of money for like common vegetables that you could find like outside of reservations for pretty reasonable prices.
Yeah, and I also feel like that relates to our campus right now because whenever I walk into a market or something, the fruits and vegetables are the highest price items in the market, which is crazy to me because like a pack of strawberries is like $8, so why would anyone buy that versus a pack of gummies for like $1.50? That makes no sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's just such an incredible point to discuss, Matthew, where you're talking about like how pricing affects like our individual choices. A lot of people when they see like they're just not buying the right foods or like they just like to eat a lot of sugar, but that's not what it is. These corporations, these grocery stores are playing a really good marketing scheme where the way they also like arrange stuff in the aisles is certain things are catching your eyes as opposed to other things. Like kind of understanding all the effects and like factors that go into like what you're eating is just so important. And I think like understanding the effects of it too, as like how the professor was going through it, is also vital for us like needing to make a change.
Also, just like a quick point, like how Mary talked about how she was an avid diet soda drinker as well, because like America's really good at the diet soda propaganda, like really, really good because they said it's like a healthy alternative, like no like harmful consequences like cancer, etc. But after like the studies, like she like talked about in the interview, it made me like sick to my stomach because like it also made her sick to her stomach because she said she never drank a diet soda after like learning about all these studies. Yeah.
Oh, I do want to add on to like that. Even the things that we consider that are supposed to be healthy, like Matthew, as you said, like diet soda, and then Iram, you talked to the professor about like yogurt, right? Typically, we'd think like yogurt and fruit is like a healthy alternative for us. Like it's a quick snack. It's better than like a donut or like a cupcake or a muffin or something like that. But then when you guys were talking about like how much additive sugars there actually are and how unhealthy it is for you, it really made me question what's in my actual fridge too. So like that's also really important.
And also, like, oh my God, Mary just said so many crazy things. Like, also, regular sugar is like 50% fructose still, which I did not know. That's crazy to me because people always advertise high fructose corn syrup as like this horrible, horrible thing. But the sugar we're consuming like regularly in our meals is like literally the exact same thing, but just like a 10% decrease. So I wish like people talked about that more in food advertisement and stuff, but they obviously don't.
Okay, yeah, kind of going back to like the fact that not all people have access to fresh foods. I think it's messed up that like personally I haven't experienced this to like a crazy extent, but I think it's messed up that college students sort of like the stereotype is that we all survive off of like packaged foods and like canned foods. I like personally I'm very fortunate to have access to that stuff. And like I've only really had like one period in my college career where like for a couple weeks I didn't have like the money to buy like fresh produce. So I was just eating like rice, dried fruit, and like canned goods for, for like 2 or 3 weeks or something. Um, but like yeah, it was not fun. But like I think it's messed up that that's a stereotype because like we should have access to this stuff like especially at our age like we consume so many calories like exercising, studying, like whatever. We should have access to that, and it's definitely in some ways systemic that like we don't.
Yeah, and when it comes to packaged or processed foods, what criteria do you guys use to determine whether a product is a healthy choice? Because marketing is so important in terms of businesses making us think that their product is healthy, but you should always be looking at the ingredients because the ingredients might have like 20 plus ingredients that are not even really related to what you want to eat sometimes or you know?
I feel like for me as a consumer, since I took organic chemistry, I am not the general public, so I know what additives are and preservatives are. So I look for those when I'm shopping, and also serving, like calories per serving size as well. And also, like, they have the nutrition label on the back, so like trans fats, saturated fats. But also, like, when you're like in a rush and you're just having to buy stuff, like you really don't care. Like you just need to eat something so you don't pass out. So I feel like that's also a huge barrier. Like the time aspect of buying food, and also just like the general disknowledge of food in general with the American public. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matthew summed it up pretty well. Just like our food choices when we're either grocery shopping or just going into like the dining hall, for example. But I also do look at like added sugars. Sometimes I'm just really craving a lot of sugary stuff, so I just go for it. But other times when I'm feeling like, oh, I'm gonna be healthy today, I'm gonna go out of the grocery store with only healthy things. Like I definitely tend to buy more like fruits, vegetables, and also like as much as I can while sticking to my like grocery budget. But there are times where I'm like, okay, I have like a final coming up. I have a midterm coming up. Like, what can I get that's super quick where I don't have to cook? And like, it's usually like Trader Joe's food, like, you know, packaged like the frozen meals sometimes. So yeah, kind of just looking at like what fits my dietary restrictions and like what I need to intake. I do want to add a point though, June, you mentioned like just not having access to food like some days in the past. For any of like UCSD students that are struggling with that, I do want to highlight the Triton Food Pantry. I think it's a great resource for anyone who's feeling food insecure, having issues just accessing food. Check out their website, check out their Instagram. We'll also link it into our Instagram later. So take a look at that.
And then just to quickly add,
100%.
like for harm reduction, like if I am eating unhealthy, like I try to add fruits and vegetables. Like that's the one thing I try to do. Just like if I'm eating like really shitty that day, like at least I can have like an apple, so I have something in my system that I feel good about. Yeah.
Yeah, now that you said apple, that made me think it was really interesting to hear when Professor Boyle said to eat your fruits and vegetables as they are without blending them up in a smoothie because it lowers the fiber amount of it. It really finely breaks it down so your body just mainly takes it as sugar instead of taking it as fiber. And I thought that was really interesting because when liking smoothies came to me as more of like a trend on social media, like all these colorful drinks that are healthy seeming because they're made of plant-based milk or fruit juices or fruits and maybe vegetables like spinach or something like leafy greens. And I've always thought they were healthy, but now I'm really reconsidering my decision making in terms of smoothies. I think in my personal life, I don't think I will limit I don't think I will forbid myself from drinking smoothies, especially when I'm having a really busy day and I need a healthy-ish alternative. But I will definitely make more conscious choices in terms of when or like what time of the day I'm going to be having a smoothie and am I going to be active afterwards? Am I going to be using that excessive sugar energy that I'm going to be consuming? I thought that was really interesting.
And then I also just wanted to quickly mention a point from the interview when you talked about shopping from Whole Foods era. Like people walk into these healthier grocery stores expecting the healthy choices to be made for them already. Like Whole Foods Erewhon's like so popular these days. Are you kidding me? Like these health stores are just like advertising like, oh, buy me, buy this product, you'll be safe, whatever. But they're actually just as unhealthy as like fast food. So it's just so hard to figure out what's healthy when you're buying something at a grocery store.
Iram, like the point on about smoothies was like very interesting to me because I definitely used to do that in the beginning of the year. Like I'd like make my smoothie at night so I can like run out the door with it when I had to go to work. And I just found there was so much convenience for that. But then again, as you said, like listening to what the professor was saying kind of makes you rethink like whether it's even beneficial to do so. And it also made me question like protein shakes. we have like places on campus that, or like just in general, where a big part of like the fitness community is like protein shake with fruits, veggies, or like anything that you can. And I just wonder like how effective it is after listening to this interview.
Iram has somewhere to be, so I will be hosting the rest of the episode because there's only a few questions left. And starting off, I wanted to ask about soda consumption. So, as someone who drinks a lot of soda, that really shocked me, all the facts about diet soda and regular soda. But do y'all drink any unhealthy drinks, or do y'all just primarily drink water? How did you feel about all those facts about soda, etc., etc.?
I drink a lot of not water. It's like it's really bad. Like especially recently, I think I've been relying a lot on like caffeine or like caffeinated drinks. Like recently, my drink of choice has been yerba and like Arizona. Yeah, I was listening to the podcast and I was like, oh my God, like I'm gonna die. Like this is going to be the death of me. Yeah, but I feel like personally the answer might not be to like completely just like cut it out right away. I think there's some degree of like scaling back I have to do for sure. But I think for me, I'm at a point where I can make the decision to keep drinking unhealthy drinks at a regulated amount.
I think I'm in the boat of, I think, and I hope that it's regulated. Like, I have some sort of control over what I drink. I do rely on like coffee a lot, like every day. But it's okay, it's just once every day. Um, Other than that, mainly water, but occasional like boba, like that's gotta be there. But I'm someone who doesn't consume like Celsius or like Red Bull or something, so I think I'm safe in that regard.
For me, I also don't drink too many sugary beverages. I only when like I have to study a lot, I might drink a Celsius. Um, Occasionally boba. I won't be removing that from my diet. And yeah, I just found it interesting when they were describing how the brain detects sweetness from like sugar-free drinks. I thought that was really interesting because I was always confused about like why I perceived everything as so sweet when there's like nothing or like no sugar in it.
Yeah, I personally thought it was just so crazy that your body like senses your pancreas even when there's artificial sweeteners, which like completely fucks up your insulin response. No one talks about that at all. Like, I did not know that because people were like, diet soda is a really great alternative. So that really shifted my perspective on things. But also, I think moving forward to fix my habits just a little bit, I'm still gonna drink. But I think I will drink in inclusion like 2 hydro flasks of water a day if I do those actions because, like I said, drinking in moderation is fine as long as you're doing harm reduction with those actions. I think everything should be fine because we're human. We're gonna do like not the best things, but how do we regulate those things is the good question to ask. Yes. And then moving into that, I also wanted to ask about um, eating habits like midnight snacking because Iram wanted me to bring up that we all eat late at night, especially college students, and we snack a lot. And I am a really big offender of this. So if anyone wants to talk about their like late night snacking habits, feel free to.
I am definitely a late night snacker. Like, it's a problem. Ice cream is like my biggest downfall. It's my kryptonite. If like I just have to have ice cream sometimes, and that's usually my late night snack. I think they also brought up like cereal at night, and I definitely partake in that. I think cereal is a great like it's like a midnight snack. Better than a breakfast item, but that's for another debate. But yeah, I typically midnight snack when I'm like studying for something. If I'm up late, like it's just a way of like keeping myself awake. That's when. So I don't think I'm the right person to give any advice to change, but I hear you, and I'm in the same boat as you guys.
Yeah, for me, I know in the last episode I talked a lot about how participating in hobbies that are super active helps. Well, in this case, it does not. Volleyball usually like ends I think like around like 10:30 when I play, or like 11. And so I won't have eaten dinner before. So we'll usually like my friends and I will go out to eat somewhere, but like we end up getting home at like 2 a.m. So it's a midnight snack, or it turns into like a midnight meal, which is kind of bad because it's, it introduces cortisol into our system, I think Professor Boyle said. And it's a little bad because I do that on a super regular basis, but she also said that like if you don't eat, like if you think not eating is less healthy for you than to just eat. So I think might kind of be a case of that. It's like I'd rather have something in my system than nothing.
My snacking habits are also pretty bad. I live right next to the market. It's like so convenient to just get so many snacks. Um, so yeah, that's pretty bad. And like going off of like eating with friends, I definitely eat more when I'm in a social setting, especially when like the portions are like larger in like restaurants and stuff. I don't want to like waste anything. So that's when I tend to like eat more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a perfect transition into what I was gonna bring up, Vicky, about social eating, because like people text late at night, like, "Do you want to go to In-N-Out? Do you want to go to Denny's, etc., etc.?" And I'm like, "Duh," because you get to socialize with people and then you get to eat with them. Like, that's like the best part. But the problem is, it's like 1 a.m. and as June says, it really fucks up your metabolism. So, and I think like to reflect on everything that Professor Boyle said, like if you are eating late at night, like moderation is key. Like it doesn't have to be a full meal. Maybe it's just like a little thing like to nibble on, not like a full platter of like hash browns and eggs and etc. But social eating really does get me all the time. Like that's my favorite hangout, is to socially eat, because there's nothing better in the world than eating with friends. Yeah. If anyone wants to add to that.
I completely agree with that. Like, it's just so much better eating with people that you actually enjoy their company. Like the food just tastes better at that point. But Matthew, you were saying like someone asked me to go to Denny's, like I'll go with them. I'm usually the person asking, so it's kind of bad. But yeah, it doesn't help in my friend group where like if I ask, like people will say yes. So there's no one like making the smart decision for us. But yeah, social eating is a thing, and I think just learning how to kind of listen to yourself, listen to your body while you're partaking it is really important, because sometimes you're just in a situation where you're like, okay, like as Vicky said, like I have to finish it off, or like I have to go through with it, and like saying no or saying like it's just not an answer. So
Is it okay if I like ramble like a little bit? Okay. If anyone has anything else to say, maybe you should say it before, because this might feel a little long. Okay. You got. Did you, Matthew? Okay. Never mind.
No, it's okay. You can go.
Okay. My bad. So I was watching a YouTube video about like, you guys know like food interviews, right? Like Hot Ones, and I forgot the name of the show, but yeah, you get the point. They were talking about like why those types of interviews feel so much more personal than like a regular interview, like those ones where they like premiere the movie, they have them sitting in front of the poster and like they're asking them questions. I feel like they said something that kind of relates, is that like when you eat with someone, you're putting yourself in like a vulnerable position, like you're being observed in such like normally like a private setting. I think it makes like the social interaction feel a lot more intimate, which I feel like is why a lot of people do like social eating hangouts. But like Matthew said, like regulating it, not regulating it, but like what's the word? Moderation. Moderation is key. Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, moderation is key. Like you can listen to yourself. Like you know how much food you need. You don't need to force yourself to eat more. And then also the second thing, I am still of the mentality of like I'm not gonna leave any leftovers. Like if I take this home, I probably won't finish it, that kind of thing. But I was speaking to one of my friends, Amy, recently. I had like a little thing of leftovers, and I was like, I'm just gonna finish it now, even though I don't really want to eat it. instead of taking it home. And then she said something that was really interesting to me, which is like, once you start taking things home and like figure out that you can make things out of it, it becomes a lot easier to like take home leftovers. Like you can make something new out of it, even if it's not that much. So I think it's like training yourself to not have that idea of like food is only food if it's in a certain quantity is really valuable. And then also last thoughts, like I think it also kind of is like, if you have leftovers, you don't have to force yourself to finish it. Like your body is not a trash can. You should be feeding yourself what you need. Like, like you don't need to force yourself to eat something if you don't want to eat it. You know, like you should treat your body well. Like, you don't throw food away into your body. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say.
Also, I just wanted to bring up like the point, June, like food is so socialized these days. Like, oh my god. Like mukbangs are everywhere. Just taking photos of your food is everywhere. Like vlogging, food vlogs are everywhere. Food everything's everywhere. Just like showing off your food has like become like a status symbol. Like how much good food you can eat. And I feel like that drives people to be even more impulsive with food decisions, because like why would you not want to say yes to food when you could go eat really good food right now? Like that's so stupid. But I feel like not having that impulsivity of just wanting to eat like like out all the time is so hard these days, especially in a capitalistic society where fast food is just so easy compared to like cooking at home and cleaning up all the dishes and et cetera for 2 hours, especially as the students. Like that's just not realistic, especially during midterms and finals, which is like half the quarter. And as Professor Boyle says, like campus meals also are just horrible as well. So even if you order those, you're not getting good supplemental nutrients, et cetera, with your food. So it's just so hard to make healthy food decisions these days. I think that is all we have to talk about today. Does anyone have any final thoughts on food, eating, any of the topics that Professor Boyle brought up in the interview that you just want to just mention that stood out for you?
I guess just the only closing thoughts I had are like just remembering that not everyone has access to healthy food. Be mindful of that. And, I have not done very much research into this, so I should do more research into this, and I want to. But maybe supporting organizations that help mitigate that. I think Jasmine mentioned the Trine Food Pantry, which I think is a really good place to start. And yeah.
For me, what I want to talk about was like harm reduction with food choices specifically, because they talked about that in the interview. Like, even if you do eat something, like you can always mitigate that by walking. Like when Professor Boyle talked about the glucose receptor in New York City, and she was talking about like she ate all this really unhealthy stuff from a French restaurant, and she expected her glucose levels to spike throughout the day, but she was walking all throughout the city, and that actually mitigated all those glucose levels. Like there are things like even if we make unhealthy decisions, we can mitigate that with better choices. And I feel like that's really important for us as college students, because even though we make these unhealthy choices, we can do stuff to fix these. Like it's not completely unsolvable. And if people are making unhealthy choices, don't shame them, please, because food is a very sensitive topic for people. It is, as June says, it's putting yourself in a vulnerable state. Most people don't like to talk about food or eating disorders, et cetera, because that is something that affects them on a psychological and mental level. So just be kind to everybody and don't judge anyone's food choices, but also just promote healthier eating. And also just like if someone makes a better choice, like even if it's just one choice, that's more steps towards being better as a whole. So just support people that need help with better choices, or just support their choices in general. That's it. That's all I have to say.
I do agree with that. I think Matthew, you bring up a really good point about like supporting the people around you. And I think we need to understand that food is a necessity for us. We need it to function, we need it to live. And by speaking out about all of this, we're not trying to promote any unhealthy eating patterns, but just to control over what's going on or what you're putting into your body. I do want to point out, like, as Matthew said, like, don't judge people for what they're eating, what their food choices are, because you don't know all the factors that are going into what they're eating, whether they have access to food, whether they have the money to buy like nutrient rich foods. Also, if like someone's eating more than you, someone's eating less than you, understand that every body is different. Everyone has different needs. It's just so important in society today. Don't look on social media and think that you have to be like that one person, the perfect person. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with like what everyone said. Everyone made amazing points, and I just want to end by saying like it's important to be mindful of like the food that we're consuming. Like throughout this interview, I learned about like how to make healthy food choices, which I find really important in being able to have better habits in the future, or like work towards better work towards having a better or healthier lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, I just finishing off of what Vicky said, as someone who is an anthropologist, food is very, very cultural and it's very ethnocentric, and especially in America, especially like what type of fruits and vegetables you eat. But this episode is not to educate anyone, like tell anyone that their food is bad and the food they're consuming is bad, because that's essentially insulting someone's culture and their background. So, but there are healthier choices to make within your own culture as well, like rice, like brown rice versus white rice. Like you can choose brown rice, etc., etc. But also like indigenous vegetables in America as well, like growing indigenous vegetables, finding local farmers markets, etc., etc. If you have the resources to that, but just whatever you can do to make better choices on your own terms is all we want to promote. And food is something that we all enjoy. So we just wanted to take the time to say thank you for listening to this episode, because I know it is a very sensitive topic to a lot of people. So if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments of the episode, and we will have resources linked to the Triton Food Pantry on our Instagram. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Iram, for that wonderful interview and for hosting this week. Such a delightful two episodes to talk about. So amazing. And thank you to Professor Mary Boyle for the entire interview. So insightful. And that's all we really wanted to push out, is the knowledge of food and healthy living choices, because as Americans, we don't get that very often, especially with all the propaganda that is spewed out by American capitalism. So thank you so much for listening, and hopefully y'all tune in next week. Thank you so much.